Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S Study Circle. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindi newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the daily edition of the Hindi newspaper dated 3rd January 2021. And the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start the discussion. Now this article on page number 12 is related to the recently concluded Brexit deal or the agreement that was signed between the United Kingdom and the European Union. And this can be an important topic for us from General Studies paper 2 point of view in the topic international relations. So in this article we will discuss the key aspects of the agreement that has been signed between the UK and the European Union and which has come into force from 1st January 2021. So let us look at the key aspects of this deal that has been signed between UK and EU and what changes in the relationship between UK and EU after the coming up of this agreement. Also, we'll look at what are the apprehensions for India after the Brexit from the EU and what are the opportunities for India at the same time. So we will look at all these aspects. And we will be discussing this issue in a question answer format. So let us start with the first question, that is, what is the Brexit deal? Now the term Brexit simply refers to British exit, that is, it refers to the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. And regarding European Union, we all know that it is an economic and political union which involved 28 European countries. Now what this EU did was that it allowed free trade and free movement of people to live and work in whichever country they choose among the 28 European countries which are the part of the European Union. And the United Kingdom had joined this European Union in 1973. And at that time it was known as European Economic Community. And UK is the first member state to withdraw from the EU or exit the European Union. So in this regard, the United Kingdom had voted to leave the European Union in 2016. And it officially left the trading bloc on 31st January 2020. And both the sides, that is the UK and EU, agreed to keep many things in terms of the trade and movement of people the same as it used to be when UK was a member of the EU until December 31st, 2020. And this was done in order to allow enough time to agree to the terms of the new trade deal that had to be signed between the UK and the EU. And now the UK and EU have signed this trade deal. So let us look at key aspects of the new trade deal that has been signed between the UK and the EU. So this UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement is a deal that contains new rules for how the UK and the European Union will live, work and trade together. And that is because UK is no more a member of the European Union now. Now, a key aspect of the new trade deal that has been signed between the United Kingdom and the European Union is that it retains the zero tariffs and the quotas trade regime of the past on all the import of the goods. Now what this simply means is that when UK was a part of the European Union, no custom duties were imposed on imports either from UK into EU or from EU into UK. And this non-imposition of custom duties on the goods and services was known as zero tariffs. Further, zero quota means that there was no limit on the volume of goods that are traded between the member countries of the European Union. And this remains the same even in this UK-EU trade agreement, which means that there will be no limit on the volume of goods that can be traded between the UK and the EU. Now these tariffs and quotas are generally known as the tariff barriers because under such a regime, tax is imposed on the imports from the other nations. However, besides these tariff barriers, there are non-tariff barriers also. And they can be related to standards for the working condition of the labor from the other country. And there can be standards for social and environmental regulations. So under this deal between the UK and the EU, both the sides have agreed to shared or common rules on standards on the workers' right. And also they have agreed to common rules on the social as well as environmental regulation. So this means that in terms of trade, things are likely to remain the same and not much has changed. So in the trade sector, there will be no taxes on the goods or the tariffs on the goods, and there will be no limits on the amount that can be traded. So there will be no tariff and quota limits on the goods that are traded between UK and EU from the 1st January 2021. However, a cause of concern is that there will be new checks that will be introduced at the borders. And this is because earlier there were no checks on the borders between the UK and the EU when UK was a part of the European Union. And under these new checks, new safety checks can be conducted, and custom declarations will have to be filed by the countries that trade with UK, and also the companies from UK will have to file these custom declarations and will have to stop for safety checks on border with the European Union countries. So because of this, a concern is that there will be delays in terms of trade between UK and the other EU members. And this is likely to increase the red tapeism in terms of trade between UK and EU. So this simply means that the trade will not be as free flow as it used to be when UK was a part of the EU. Further, when UK was a part of the European Union, the banking, architecture and accounting services had automatic right of access to the EU markets. However, such business offering services such as banking, architecture and accounting will lose this automatic right of access to the EU markets, and they will face some sort of restrictions. Further, there will no longer be automatic recognition of professional qualifications for people such as doctors, chefs, and architects. So, this is another concern in terms of services and qualifications between the UK and the EU. Another major change that has happened after the coming of this trade deal is that there will be no role in the UK for the European Court of Justice, which is the highest court of EU. And if any dispute arises between UK and EU, that cannot be solved by the European Court of Justice, which earlier used to happen. Now, if any dispute arises and which cannot be solved between UK and EU, it will be referred to an independent tribunal. So these are the changes in terms of the trade in goods and services, and also the role of European Court of Justice and other disputes that are likely to arise between UK and EU in terms of different aspects of trades and services. So now what changes after the January 1, 2021? So basically earlier when UK was a member of the European Union, there was freedom to work and live between UK and EU. Now this position comes to an end in 2021, and the UK nationals will now need a visa if they want to stay in the EU more than 90 days in a 180-day period. However, one likely benefit for UK is that it is now free to set its own trade policy and can negotiate deals with other countries. And that is particularly an opportunity for India because India can now enter into a trade deal with UK directly. And we note that the trade agreement between India and the European Union, that is known as the BTIA, has been lingering for past few years. So in that scenario, India can finalize a trade deal directly with the UK because it is no more a member of the European Union. And in this regard, the UK is already in talks with US, Australia, New Zealand, etc. for a trade deal. And these countries currently do not have free trade deals with the European Union. Further, regarding disruption at the borders between UK and the EU countries, it is being said that there may not be new taxes to pay at the border according to the new trade deal that has been signed. However, there will be new paperwork, and this could cause serious delays for the trade between UK and the European Union, and which is a serious cause of concern. Further, what all has still not been finalized, so decisions are still to be made on data sharing and on financial services, and the agreement on fishing is only likely to last for 5 years only. So that will again bring up issues between UK and EU. So these are a few simple aspects of the UK and the EU deal, and the details of the impact will keep coming in the newspapers in the coming months. So let us wait for proper details to come out as to what will be the impact of this trade agreement that has been signed between UK and EU on the UK and EU's economy. In this regard, we have already discussed as to what could be the likely impact on India if UK exits the European Union. Now, those concerns and opportunities still stand true. However, the British exit from the European Union has not been as harsh as it was expected earlier. But the terms of these trade deals can however be changed in the near future, and that will always be a cause of concern for India. So let us revise from that previous video as to what are the concerns for India regarding the Brexit. Now, looking at the concerns for India due to Brexit, first is that the United Kingdom had been the bridge through which Indian companies used to enter into European Union. Now, we note that the European Union is a single market and there is ease of doing trade across the countries which are a part of the European Union. However, if United Kingdom exits from the European Union, this will impact the Indian companies which are based in UK. So presently what Indian companies used to do is that they were based in UK and from there they used to trade with other countries of the European Union. Now however, if Brexit happens, the Indian companies will have to strive separately for these two different markets. That is, they will have to handle the trade in UK differently from that of the trade in other countries which are part of the European Union. So they will have to devise different or separate strategies for both these markets if UK exits the European Union. Now, an impact of this would be that the Brexit will increase the overhead cost for the Indian companies, and also it will increase the cost for setting up of new headquarters in EU on the one hand and UK on the other hand. So this is one of the impacts for the Indian companies which are presently operating in UK. Now, one of the good example of this can be the Jaguar, which has been acquired by Tata. Now, as Tata has acquired Jaguar, and because UK is a part of the European Union, Tata enjoys zero custom duty on trade in the European Union market. However, if Britain exits the European Union, the Tata company might face higher logistic cost. Also, there can be custom duties which can be imposed by the EU, and also other regulations etc. will make it difficult for the Jaguar to keep up its trade. And this might make the cars of the Jaguar company a bit less competitive as compared to the present times. So this will be the likely impact on the companies which are presently trading in UK. Now, another important concern for India here is the vulnerability of pound after the Brexit. And there can be slide in the value of the pound, and this shows the exchange rate uncertainty of the pound. Now here it should be noted that dollar is the most strong currency across the world. However, if you look at other currencies, pound is the second important currency. And we know that pound is also one of the currencies which has been included under the IMF's special drawing rights or the SDRs. So this shows that pound is also one of the important currencies after the dollar. However, if Britain exits from the European Union and if the value of pound slides down, it will lead to an increase in the value of dollar across the globe. Now, if the value of dollar increases, it adversely impacts the value of other currencies across the world. And this can lead to worsening of the current account deficit for India, as the dollar will be strengthened because of sliding of the pound. Now, why this current account deficit for India would increase? So this is mainly because India is mainly dependent upon oil imports. And if the value of dollar increases, the cost of these imports increase. So as India is importing majority of its oil consumption, it might lead to increase in the import bills for India. And that could be one of the reasons for worsening of current account deficit for India if the pound slides and dollar strengthens. Second impact is that the bonds which are raised by Indian firms and companies will see a rise in the servicing costs. So if the exchange rate of dollar was $1 for rupees 70, and if due to Brexit the value of pound slides and there is an increase in the value of dollar, which means that the dollar's value can increase up to 75 rupees or even 80 rupees. Now, due to this, what happens is that if any Indian firm has raised money from the external markets through the external commercial borrowings, and if the value of dollar increases and the value of rupee slides simultaneously, this will increase the cost of interest that the Indian companies have to pay for such borrowings. So that is also one of the impact, that the bonds which are raised by Indian firms will see a rise in the servicing costs of such bonds. And the third impact is that Indian exports to UK will suffer due to the collapse or decrease in the value of pound. Now, a simple example can be that if the value of £1 as of now was about rupees 80. And if the value of pound slides, this means that the value of rupee is increasing. So the exchange rate, that is £1, will now be exchanged at a lesser price, that is, let's say rupees 70. And as the value of pound decreases, Indian exports will become less competitive. So it is said that if the pound collapses, India's exports to UK might suffer. So these are few of the concerns which have been raised by India regarding the Brexit process. However, despite these concerns, it also provides certain opportunities to India. So let us look at these opportunities which will be created because of Brexit or exit of Britain from the European Union. Now first is that as the Britain exits from European Union, it will now actively look for trade partners. And we know that India is one of the important trading partners of UK presently. Further, India has had traditionally strong ties with the Britain. And also, India is one of the largest emerging economy in the world. And that is why UK would have a tilt towards India and will increase its trade with India. So that is one of the opportunity that is created by the Brexit from EU. Second is that UK would be freed from strict rule-based trade regime which is followed by European Union presently. And it will simplify the process of India having a free trade agreement with the UK. Now you might be knowing that India and EU are presently negotiating a free trade agreement, and that is known as Broad-Based Trade and Investment Agreement or BTIA. However, the negotiations for finalizing the BTIA are stuck because of strict rules that are applied by the EU regarding the trade with EU. And that is why India sees this as an opportunity that if UK exits from the EU, such strict rule-based trading regime will not have to be followed by India for its free trade agreement with UK. So it will be easier for India to negotiate a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. Now the third point here that should be noted is that presently, all the decisions in the European Union are taken by consensus and they are not taken by the majority. And such a consensus-based decision making makes it difficult for finalizing various issues in the EU. However, if the UK exits from the EU, it will provide greater independence to UK in making its decisions regarding trade with India. So that will also be one of the opportunities that is there for India. And finally, because of the Britain's exit from the EU, the freedom of movement of human resources will be restricted. Now we know that EU is a single market and as such, the movement of goods and human resources is very easy presently. However, if UK exits from the European Union, such movement would become difficult. And that is why UK will have to look for other countries like India for human resources. And that creates an opportunity for India for providing the human resources, and we note that India can exploit its demographic dividend by providing the human resources to UK because of Brexit. So these are few concerns for India, and at the same time there are also certain opportunities that are available for India. And with this, let's take up the next article. Now this article on page number 1 and page number 6 talks about the increasing trade deficit for India. And this reads that the trade deficit grows to $15 billion in December, which means that India's exports are declining while its imports are increasing. And that has led to a growth in the trade deficit for India. In this regard, let us look at the key aspects of the merchandise exports and merchandise import in India from our preliminary examination point of view. So in this, we will look at the important commodities that India is exporting and what are the top import commodities that India is importing. In this regard, we'll look at the top export and import destinations for India. So first, let us look at the preliminary examination questions related to this theme, and after that, we'll look at the trends in merchandise exports and imports. Now, if you look at the previous year papers, you will find that these 3 questions were asked in the preliminary examination of 2019, and all these were related to the external sector or India's international trade. So the first question reads, consider the following statement. First is that most of India's external debt is owed by the government entities, and second is that all of India's external debt is dominated in US dollars. Now, if you closely look at these statements, you will find that the first statement given here is incorrect because most of India's external debt is owed by the private sector and not by government entities. And regarding the second statement, you can easily eliminate this statement because it obviously looks incorrect because all of India's external debt cannot be denominated in US dollars. So the correct answer is D, neither one nor two. Further, if you look at this question, it reads which one of the following is not the most likely measure the government or the RBI takes to stop the slide of Indian rupee. So in such kind of questions, you should be aware of the term not that is given in the question statement. So in this, the first statement reads curbing the imports of non-essential goods and promoting exports. Now, promotion of exports will lead to earning of foreign currency for India, and that will lead to appreciation of rupee. And also curbing imports will lead to appreciation of rupee, and that is why this is a likely measure that will be taken by the RBI in order to stop the slide of Indian currency. Second statement is that encouraging Indian borrowers to issue rupee-dominated masala bonds, and this is also likely to help the appreciation of Indian rupee. Third is the easing conditions relating to the external commercial borrowing, and this will also help in appreciation of Indian rupee. So the only step which the government or the RBI is not likely to take is following an expansionary monetary, and that is why this is the only measure which the government is not likely to take, and hence all these statements are not relevant to the question that is asked, and the correct answer here is D, that is following an expansionary monetary policy. Third question is that in the context of India, which of the following factors is or are the contributor or contributors to reducing the risk of currency crisis? First is the foreign currency earnings of India's IT sector. So this will lead to increased foreign currency earning for India, and hence it will reduce the risk of a currency crisis in India, and hence it is a correct statement. If you look at the third statement, reads remittances from Indians abroad, and they are also foreign currency dominated, and as such they will also help in reducing the risk of currency crisis. However, the second statement, that is the increasing of the government expenditure, is unlikely to reduce the risk of a currency crisis, and that is because if the government starts spending more, it might lead to increased imports in India, and as such there will be more requirement of the foreign currency, and that actually increases the risk of a currency crisis. So the second statement is incorrect. So the correct answer that comes out is B, that is 1 and 3 only. Now, in the prelims of 2020, a question was again asked related to the international trade of India. And the statements given were, first is India's merchandise exports are less than its merchandise imports. So this is a well-known fact that India relies more on merchandise imports, and hence this first statement given here is correct. Further, if you look at this third statement, it is also correct because India's export of services are more than its import of services, and that is because India is known to be exporting these services to the world. And second is that India suffers from an overall trade or current account deficit, which is also correct. So the correct answer that comes out is D, that is 1, 3 and 4 only. So by solving these questions, we find that the external sector and international trade and the currency crisis, these are all important topics for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So after this, let us look at some of the important aspects of international trade of India, which have been highlighted by the economic survey. So in this, we'll be looking at the merchandise exports of India. So regarding the trends in the merchandise exports, between 2009 to 2014, the merchandise exports accounted for 16% of India's GDP. However, since then, the merchandise exports as a percentage of GDP has steadily declined to 11.3% of GDP in the first half of 2019 and 20. So this means that the share of merchandise exports in international trade has been declining as a percentage of GDP. Now, what are the top 5 export commodities that are exported from India? So these include the petroleum products, pearls, precious stones, drug formulations, gold jewelry, and iron and steel. Another important aspect is the top export destinations for India. So these include the USA, UAE, China, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And as far as the merchandise imports are concerned, between 2009 to 2014, the merchandise imports accounted for 24.3% of the GDP. However, since then, the merchandise imports as a percentage of GDP has steadily declined to 17.6% of the GDP in the first half of 2019 and 20. Now, what are the reasons for the decline in merchandise imports? Now, you might all be knowing that India is heavily dependent on the import of crude oil. And accordingly, a decline in the international crude oil prices has led to a decline in merchandise imports as a percentage of GDP. And that is because crude oil accounts for 26% of India's imports. Secondly, we note that there has been slowdown in the Indian economy, and that has been because of declining demand. And as the demand has been declining and as there has been slowdown in the Indian economy, it has also led to decline in the imports. However, even then, the merchandise imports are more as compared to the merchandise exports. So this brings us to the top 5 import commodities for India. So first, as you might all be knowing, is crude oil. Second is gold. Third are the petroleum products. Then it's the pearl and the precious stones, and coal and coke. And top 5 exporters to India, or top 5 countries from which India imports. The first one is China, and we note that the increasing trade deficit with China is one of the concerns for India. Second is the United States of America, then there is UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. And out of all these countries, India only has trade surplus with United States of America and the United Arab Emirates. So this is also one of the unique and important facts. So these are few aspects of the merchandise exports and merchandise imports from India. And these can be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And with this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 1 and page number 6 is related to the arrest of the terrorist Lakhvi, who is accused to be the mastermind of the Mumbai attack in the Taj Hotel in 2008. Now, here it is being said that this Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorist has been arrested because of the FATF meet that is likely to review the status of Pakistan. And we already know that Pakistan is under the grey list of the Financial Action Task Force. Now, this issue keeps on coming in the newspapers regularly. In this regard, you might be knowing that the United Nations Sanctions Committee under the Sanctions 1267 and 1373 designates terrorists and those who are acting for or on the behalf of these terrorists and are providing or raising and moving the funds. And accordingly, the UNSC Sanctions Committee imposes certain kind of sanctions on such kind of terrorists. Under such sanctions, already Hafiz Saeed, who was also the mastermind of Mumbai attacks, has been identified or sanctions have been imposed on him. So in this regard, the FATF wants that the Pakistan should implement the UNSC sanctions 1267 on all the terrorists that are residing in its territory. And accordingly, in order to avoid an adverse review, the Pakistan has arrested the LET terrorist Lakhvi. So in this article, we will look at the UNSC Sanctions Committee from our preliminary examination point of view, and also the key aspects and key functions of the Financial Action Task Force from our preliminary examination point of view. And we all know that this issue is a recurring issue and it keeps on coming in the newspapers regularly. But for the beginners, let us revise from the previous videos where we have discussed the UNSC Sanctions Committee and also the key aspects of the FATF. And they can be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now, this article on page number 9 reads that Pakistan is likely to remain on Financial Action Task Force's grey list. Now, this issue of grey listing of Pakistan by the Financial Action Task Force has been in news for past 2 years. In this background, let us understand some important facts related to this Financial Action Task Force from our preliminary examination syllabus. And also in this regard, we will understand what is meant by the terms grey listing and blacklisting under the Financial Action Task Force, and also what is the important mandate of the FATF. And they can be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So now regarding the Financial Action Task Force, you should note that it was created by the G7 countries in 1989. And it is the global money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog. Now, for overseeing the issue of terror financing and money laundering across the globe, the Financial Action Task Force has developed the FATF recommendations or the FATF standards. And these ensure a coordinated global response to prevent organized crime, corruption, and terrorism. And these help the authorities to go after the money of the criminals dealing in illegal drugs, human trafficking, and other crimes. Further, besides money laundering, terror financing, etc., the FATF also works to stop the funding of weapons of mass destruction. So here it should be noted that the FATF deals with money laundering, terror financing, and also illegal drugs and human trafficking and other crimes. Besides these, it also aims at stopping the funding for weapons of mass destruction. Now, from our preliminary examination point of view, important things that should be noted are that the FATF does not address at all issues related to low tax jurisdiction or tax competition. So, this means that FATF has no role in the taxation related issues. Secondly, the FATF mandate focuses only on the fight against laundering of proceeds of crime and financing of terrorism. So, this is the clear mandate of FATF, that it aims at stopping global money laundering, terror financing, and also money that comes out of organized crime, that is, illegal drugs, human trafficking, etc. And also, it aims at stopping the funding for weapons of mass destruction. However, it does not deal with any kind of taxation related issues. Now, then there is a term called the FATF 40 plus 9. Now, this FATF 40 plus 9 is a report containing a set of 40 recommendations which are intended to provide a comprehensive plan of action which is needed to fight against the money laundering. And in 2001, the FATF added 9 special recommendations to these 40 recommendations. And accordingly, these have come to be known as 40 plus 9 FATF standards. So, this is another important term that can be asked in your preliminary examination. Then, as we have learned in today's news article, that the Pakistan is likely to remain on the grey list of FATF. So, what is meant by this grey list or the black list? Now, in this regard, the FATF issues a list of non-cooperative countries or territories, and these are called as the FATF blacklist countries. Now, these are the countries or territories that are considered to be uncooperative in the international efforts against money laundering and terror financing. Further, grey list countries are those countries which are under the watch of FATF, and these are those territories which have strategic anti-money laundering or countering the financing of terrorism deficiencies, for which they have developed an action plan with the Financial Action Task Force, and it is monitored by the Financial Action Task Force. So the grey list countries are under the watch, and blacklist countries are those countries which are non-cooperative in the field of money laundering and terror financing. And accordingly, Pakistan is on this grey list and is likely to remain in the near future. So these are few important points related to Financial Action Task Force, its mandate, and also the grey list and the blacklist. Page number 14 is regarding the UN's blacklisting of the Pakistan Taliban leader Noor Wali Mahsood, and he is the head of Tehreek-e-Taliban, which is a terror group which operates in Pakistan. So he has been designated as a global terrorist by the UN for participating in financing, planning, and perpetrating acts on behalf of and in support of entities associated with Al-Qaeda. And the UN Security Council's 1267 ISIL and Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee has added Masood now to that list. And previously also, Osama bin Laden's son was added to this list, and also Hafiz Saeed was added to this list. So let us learn about important facts related to this sanctions committee and few important points which can be important for us from the mains examination under the General Studies paper 2 under the topic International Relations. So here you should note that a blacklisted person is subjected to a travel ban, freezing of assets, and an arms embargo. Now, regarding freezing of assets, you should note that all the UN member governments across the globe immediately freeze the funds, financial assets, or any economic resources that come under direct or indirect ownership of the designated individual, which means that all the financial or economic assets of the blacklisted person are frozen by the member nations of the United Nations. Further, regarding travel ban, you should note that the entry or transit of this person is also banned by the members of United Nations. Further, an arms embargo is also imposed on the concerned blacklisted person. So under this, all the member countries are directed to block the channels that might directly or indirectly facilitate the sale of arms to such person. So here we should understand that the blacklisting of a terrorist mainly deals with the travel ban for that person, freezing of economic assets of that person, and also an embargo or restriction on the sale or purchase of arms to that person. And after the person has been blacklisted, the member countries of the United Nations impose all these bans on the concerned person. Now, besides a ban on the travel and the freezing of assets, non-material support is also banned by the UNSC under the blacklisting of a person. And here you should note that any non-material support in the form of technical advice, assistance or logistic support or training is also banned for the member countries. So the member countries of the UN cannot provide technical advice, assistance or logistic support to that person. Now here you should note that India is also seeking a ban on the Maulana Azhar Masood, who is known to be the mastermind of the recent Pulwama attacks. And he heads the organization Jaish-e-Mohammed. And presently he is supposed to be living in the Pakistan. Now, as Pakistan is also a member of the United Nations, and if the UN Security Council blacklists Maulana Azhar Masood, he will also face all these bans under such blacklisting by the UN. Now, after this, let us understand what are the key aspects of the Sanctions Committee of the United Nations Security Council. Now, regarding the Sanctions Committee of the United Nations Security Council, you should note that the Security Council can take action to maintain or restore international peace and security under the Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. And the sanction measures have been provided under the Article 41 of the UN Charter. And these sanctions are different from the use of armed forces in restoring the international peace and security. Now, these sanctions include a range of sanctions, including economic, trade sanctions, or targeted sanctions like arms embargo, travel bans, and financial and diplomatic restrictions. And these sanctions are generally resorted to when the peace has been threatened and diplomatic efforts fail to find a solution. So, in such a scenario, the United Nations Security Council tries to impose sanctions on either persons or. Now, this article on page number 8 reads that Assam throws a lifeline to its only Ramsar site. And what is the name of this Ramsar site that is present in Assam? So, it is known as Deepor Beel, and it is located in the city of Guwahati. So in this article, let us look at important aspects of the Deepor Beel from our preliminary examination point of view, and also how to go about the topic wetlands from our preliminary examination point of view, and where has it been covered in detail so that you can prepare this topic well for the preliminary examination. Now, if you go through the prelims compass, you will find that the Ramsar Convention related to the wetlands has been covered in detail. And this convention on wetland was signed in the year 1971, and it is an intergovernmental treaty which provides the framework for the conservation and the wise use of wetlands. And this wise use is the core philosophy of Ramsar Convention, and it aims at maintenance of the ecological character within the context of sustainable development, which means that although the wetlands can be used for economic development, however, their ecological character should not be changed while doing so. Now, another important term that is associated with Ramsar Convention is the Montreux Record, and it is simply a register of those wetland sites which have seen a change in their ecological character because of human development and interference. Now, in this, two Montreux Record sites of India are present. First is the Loktak Lake that is located in the state of Manipur, and second one is the Kevla Dev National Park of Rajasthan. And you might be knowing that in the prelims of 2015, a question was asked related to the Loktak. Further, in the prelims compass of environment and ecology, the Ramsar wetland sites in India have been provided. And along with the list of these wetlands, a description of those wetlands have also been provided, and they can be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So, for example, in Himachal Pradesh, 3 wetland sites that are listed in the Ramsar Convention are present, and the details of those wetland sites have been provided. So accordingly, Deepor Beel, about which we have seen in this news article, is located in the state of Assam. And it is a permanent freshwater lake and is a former channel of the Brahmaputra river. And you might all be knowing that the rivers of the northeastern part of India are known for changing their course. And accordingly, during this change of course of the channel of Brahmaputra, a permanent freshwater lake has been created in the form of Deepor Beel. Now, some of the threatened birds that are found at this location include the pot-billed pelican, the lesser and greater adjutant stork, and the Bear's pochard. Accordingly, you will find the list of other important wetlands from different states in India and the description of these wetlands. And these aspects that have been covered in the prelims compass become very important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Further, you might all be knowing that recently 10 new Ramsar sites have been declared and added in the list of wetlands of international importance in the Ramsar Convention. So, the names of these new wetland sites that have been added is also important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So, you can see that the Nandor Madhameshwar has been identified in Maharashtra, Saman Bird Sanctuary in Uttar Pradesh, Nawabganj Bird Sanctuary in Uttar Pradesh again, Samaspur and Sandhi Bird Sanctuary in Uttar Pradesh. Further, Parvati Agra Bird Sanctuary, Sarsai Nawar Jheel, both are also located in Uttar Pradesh. And in Punjab, three other sites have been identified, and these include Beas, Nangal Wildlife Sanctuary, and Keshwapur Miani Community Reserve. So, you will find a list of all these aspects in the Prelims Compass of Environment and Ecology, which is freely available on our eLearn platform. So do go through that part and prepare this topic of wetlands in detail. And this is a very important topic for us from the preliminary examination point of views. And it is an information based topic. So it is easy for everyone to understand. However, it becomes difficult for one to remember. So do try and remember each and every aspect about these wetlands that have been covered in the prelims compass. With this, we conclude today's discussion. And this is the question for the day.